Welcome back. So I am all prepped and ready to go ahead and start my monochromatic landscape watercolor painting. So I have my paper sketched out. I decided just to sketch out with a diluted version of my paint. I have things taped because I know that that's going to make it easier. I have my paint ready, and I have my reference right here. As well as my bonus paper that I'm going to use just to create a quick tool as I'm getting started to be able to reference. So for that quick tool, I went ahead and taped down a little bit down the side, which you don't have to, but I like to do that because it makes it a little bit neater. And then I created a bunch of different columns. And so I have 1 through 10 where I'm going to create a value scale in the color that I plan on using for my monochromatic. So previously I already mixed my color. I used blue with some green and a little bit of brown to make it a little bit darker. But over here, what I'm going to do is I have water with just a tiny bit of it in there, which is what I use to sketch. And I'm going to do that as number 1. So I'm just going to paint it in. And notice as I'm painting on this watercolor paper, it takes that paint so much better than when I'm practicing in my sketchbook. So get ready, it looks so much better. Then I'm gonna grab just a little bit and I'm gonna pull a little bit down. So it's just a little bit darker. And I'm gonna paint that. And I'm gonna grab a little bit more. And so I'm gonna do this just to create my value scale. And I should be able to see a difference between each one. Now, as I start to get to these darker colors, that's when I would really use a lot of layering, and I need probably some more pigment. So as you can see, when I get to my 6 value, it's not super different from my 5 value. So I'm gonna mix some more of my paint. So over here, I'm gonna grab a bunch of that blue. I'm gonna grab some of that green. Ooh, and that's a lot of green, so maybe a little bit more blue. There you go. And I'm gonna grab some of that brown. And I can test it out over here. Okay, that looks pretty good. So that's really, really dark. So I'm actually going to work my way backwards now. So I'm going to go here. This is probably as dark as I'm going to get. Probably a couple layers of that would be as dark as I'm going to get. I'm going to pull some of that to the side and add just a little bit of water to it. Now I'm trying to find just a step down. A little more water. And so I'm trying to meet here in the middle. And just like I'll have to do on my actual project, when I get to those different layers, I'm probably going to have to do, or when I get to those darker values, I'm going to have to do some more layering. So like right here, I'm going to layer on top of this one. And then I'm probably going to have to go back and layer on top of these. That time I'm going to get it a lot darker. All right, so now it's looking like I'm getting a pretty good value scale to be able to reference. I can darken this one up even more. I might even make like a browner version. There we go. Just kind of off to the side so that I can make sure that my dark colors are really, really dark. But here's a nice little value scale that I now can reference. And I have a really dark version of my paint, a really light version, and a medium version, all prepped in the lid that I can use. So then I'm going to keep this off to the side as I'm working. One little thing you can do, if it helps, is you can kind of just plan out based on your value scale what values are going to go where. And so looking at it, I know that I have some like ones or even the white of the page. So I would even call that like a 0. So I have some of that here and there. And then here is like a 1. And then my 2s are probably like right in there. And then I can kind of plan all the way through to like, okay, this is my dark, this is like a 10. These are like 10s and 9s, so that you can kind of plan out what values are going to go where. This is probably like somewhere like a 7 or an 8. Maybe a 7 down here, maybe an 8 up there. And so you can kind of mark up your paper. Just, I like to do that just so I can remember what value I'm going for. Or you can just look at it as reference. So once you have that main part on there, then you're ready to go ahead and start applying value. Now mine is pretty complicated. I've got all these different values working in here with all this different texture, and I need to kind of avoid some of this. So this is probably a lot more complicated than the tutorials that you've done previously. So if you have one like that, then feel free to simplify a little bit. I'm not going to get every single little dark little crevice in here, and I'm just going to layer up when I get to those darker parts. So as I'm working, I'm probably just going to start with the main like 2 and 3 area, because I'm going to avoid the 0 and the 1 for now. And anywhere that's just kind of these main 2 or 3 area or darker, I'm going to go ahead and get a layer on. So I'm going to kind of pull this off to the side. So I still have my reference. You guys just can't see it on the screen. If you have a larger brush, this first layer is probably when you would use that larger brush the most. And I'm just going to grab my lighter version of my color, and I'm going to start painting that in. And when I'm doing this lighter version, I'm really using quite a bit of water. Now, if you only have the brush that I provided to you, it still should work. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. All right, now looking at my image, there's like a little white area up here. It's like a cloud area, so I'm going to kind of avoid that spot. I'm going to apply a little bit extra water right there to kind of soften up some of that. And so that's just starting to get that pigment in there. I'm going to do the same thing on my water. So I'm just getting my first layer on there. So right in here it gets pretty light, so I'm not going to go over it too much. And that's a pretty good just first layer to be able to work with. Now on my sky and on my water, it looks very like blended, very nicely blended. So that's what I'm focusing on first, and it's some lighter to medium colors. So while this paint is still wet, I'm going to go ahead and start adding some pigment and build up some of those layers. So I'm pulling from my darker pigment now, and notice because this is still wet, it allows me to add some extra pigment. And then I'm actually just kind of blending with plain water. And I'm going to go kind of, I know that the trees are there, but I'm going to go behind it because the trees are just going to be dark on top of that. I'm also going to do kind of this part of the mountainscape. So I'm just trying to get those colors starting to layer up on there. So notice I kind of work back and forth. So now as this one's drying, I'm going to darken up that side a little bit, because I know I want this to blend. I'm even grabbing some of my darker color. So I'm working wet on wet for these areas. And over here is pretty dark. All right, that's pretty good to start with those colors. I do know I'm gonna need more pigment because I'm going through it pretty quickly. So I'm gonna make some more, and I remember how to make it. For me, it's blue, and then green, and then a little bit of brown. And then I always test it on my extra page, and it looks good. And so I know that these two kind of corners are really dark. So I'm gonna apply some more there. Okay. Now, while those are drying, I'm gonna go ahead and start to get some of those darker pigments where I know that they are. So like there's a little tree scape right here. So I'm gonna go straight into my darker pigment. And I'm just gonna block that in. Now I'm still gonna go back and add details on top of this later. This is me just kind of blocking in some of this. This mountain range has like a really dark outline almost. It's really dark right in there. And then it's kind of medium in between. So I'm gonna kind of just grab some water and kind of pull that in. Kind of medium down here. That's where some trees will end up going. Right now I'm just finding the main pigmented areas. So there's kind of a dark spot right there. And these little mountain ranges are tricky because they've got some light and some dark spots. So I'm not covering them completely because I know that I'm gonna want some of it to be lighter. And so really, I'm just kind of starting to block in. Where some of that is. Same thing down here. And I already need some more pigment, so I'm gonna pull a bunch more. You're gonna get really good at making your color by the time you're done with this. Test it out, looks pretty good. So down here, got some darker areas. And they've got a little more texture. So I'm kind of creating that texture, not overthinking it. It's part of the trick. Don't want to overthink it. Up here, I know that I want that to kind of blend a little more, so I'm going to add a little more water to it. So this is a pretty good first layer overall. At this point, I'm gonna wanna walk away. I'm gonna wanna let it dry completely, and then I'm gonna come back to it and do some more details here in a little bit.